The cup has been lifted, and the NHL newsreel is firing at will. Jonathan Toews, fantasy relevant? Let's talk all about it on today's show.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, my fantasy fanatics? Welcome back inside the lab to your 30-minute NHL news source with a fantasy spin that takes your team to the top for the upcoming draft season. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, and I'm joined, as always, by my distinguished co-host, Mr. Steel Roden. On this side of the microphone, fresh out of the barber chair, it's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone, holding it down for all of those fantasy degenerates that are trying to get a leg up on the competition. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 wager hits. Steel, we covered what happened in the Stanley Cup final at length. And now that things are starting to happen in the rest of the NHL, it's actually a breath of fresh air for guys like you and I who come on here and talk about everything. So I'm excited to have some topics here that are once again very fantasy relevant. Duchesne, Zetterland, Donato, the Marchman trade. But the most recent news, and I don't want to say the biggest, but perhaps the most intriguing, Jonathan Toews chooses to go home. Winnipeg, a Jets team that knocked on the door the past couple of years but clearly wasn't good enough. What's your take on this? What's your take on the Jets? How do you feel about Johnny T? Number two, because I don't know how I feel next season. You know, the man was in India doing a lot of praying. I don't know how you feel what that means for his fantasy value.
Yeah, this is a dark horse sleeper pick, in my opinion. I don't think he's going to be one that people go to target later in the draft. I wouldn't mind picking him up as maybe my second or last pick in the fantasy hockey draft, but this is a player that hasn't played for 3 years now. His last season, or 2 years now, 2022, 2023, played 53 games. You could see how his illness with the chronic immune system had affected his game over the last 2 seasons that he played. And it took a toll on him. So this is a player, I kind of want to connect it to Gabriel Landeskog in a sense, another player who we haven't seen play in the last couple of years, but obviously different situations for those two players. I'm interested. I'll say that. I'm excited for him to be back in the NHL and to see him back playing once again. He's 37 years old as well. You got to keep that in mind. It's a tough one to pick, but this is not a player that I would target on my team.
This might be one of those things that if he can provide even a little bit of on-ice value, this could be a situation where his contributions to the Winnipeg Jets' success might far outweigh what he brings in terms of fantasy value.
Yeah,
and I mean,
exactly.
Up the middle for Winnipeg as well. After Mark Scheifele, Vlad Namestnikov, Adam Lowry, it's not exactly a deep center position for this Winnipeg Jets team. So I see this as a low-risk, high-reward kind of situation for Kevin Cheveldayoff in the front office in Winnipeg, who, it's funny, we've been talking a lot about GMs. He's had his ups and downs, but right now this Winnipeg team is close. I think we can agree on that. Are they right there? Are they good enough as the Florida Panthers? No, they're not. But they're close, Steele. And there's some interesting pieces on this team headed into next season, fantasy-wise. You know how I feel about Cole Perfetti. You know how I feel about, those waiver guys, the Nino Niederreiters, the Iafallos of the world. They also have some really good blue liners. Pionk, Morrissey, even an emerging Dylan Sandberg. There's a lot of value on this team, and I think what I want to say about Jonathan Toews is I'd be okay leaving him alone until I see what happens. I'm not taking a risk on this guy until I see what he can do on the ice, because let's say he doesn't perform and you're one of those guys or gals who got excited about just the name. That would be a mistake here. Could be good for the Winnipeg Jets overall, But I would say, let's wait and see this guy on the ice a little bit. Interesting move, though, from the Winnipeg Jets overall, I'd say, Steele. One of many interesting moves that have just gone down in the NHL. We're not even at July 1.
Yeah, the frenzy begins. That is indeed on this podcast. Look, we're getting all the news over the last week. Matt Duchene, Mason Marchman, Jonathan Toews. It's crazy. It's already happening a couple days after the Stanley Cup Finals. For me, again, Jonathan Toews, like I want to relate it back to Gabriel Landeskog because it's just another player that we haven't seen play in the last couple of seasons. But he comes back in the first round of the playoffs, puts up 4 points in 5 games. So that's something I want to like keep in mind when I look at Jonathan Toews. Like, yeah, it's been a couple of years, but we know he has such a good skill set. And again, bringing that veteran presence, that calmness in the center position. If he even goes back to somewhat of his form just from 4 or 5 years ago, this is a player that you want to keep an eye on. But I agree with you. You gotta put him in your notes and see if he's able to produce in the first couple of weeks, month.
31 points in 53 games for Jonathan Toews in his previous 53-game season in 2022-23. Interestingly enough, Steele dominated in the faceoff dot that year, winning 63% of his draws, a 57% man, probably an angle why Kevin Cheveldayoff's okay to take this risk. Let's talk about Mason Marchman if you're good, because clearly there was going to have to be someone with a little bit of contract, 4.5 left on his 4-year, $18 million deal. Jim Nill's going to get frisky this offseason. The Dallas Stars need to make something happen. We know there's some contract juggling, going on with some veterans here. What's your take on Marchman? Number one, I'd say a very valuable fantasy piece. The Seattle Kraken seem to be a bit of a black hole in terms of fantasy value. Marchman, last year, 47 points in 62 regular season games, can be very streaky at times, Steele. Hit me with your take on this player who, I actually like a whole lot. Dallas Stars, though, going to be active come July 1.
Yeah, they most definitely will. I mean, I believe I said it the other day on one of our most recent episodes as well, is that they only had $500,000 in cap space, and they still have to re-sign guys like Jamie Benn, Mikael Granlund, Matt Duchene. We're going to talk about him shortly as well. They had to get something off the books. And even with this Jason Robertson trade rumor, which is to me absolutely insane, they need some maneuvering right now. And Mason Marchman frees up some cap space for them. They now have just under $5 million of cap space to deal with. So they're going to be active. There's no question about that. For me, Mason Marchman and what he brings fantasy value-wise with this team, I mean, this is a guy that's going to be in the top 6. This is a guy that's going to most likely be on the first power play unit as well. This is fantasy-wise, this is a dungeon of a team to go to besides Brandon Montour, who I really like as well, who brings the peripherals. We talked about Matty Beniers potentially having a bounce-back season. Guys like Capo Caco. What will Mason Marchman do to this organization? Because I actually do think he fits into the culture well. He fits into the style that they play. I think he's going to bring some upside offensively. So I'm keeping an eye out for Mason Marchman. Somewhere in the 15th, 16th round, I think you can snag him around there. Yeah. Again, just look what he did this season, 47 points in 62 games, obviously playing with an elite group in Dallas. It's a different situation in Seattle. I still think he has some offensive prowl to his game. He plays with a little bit of grit as well. 53 penalty minutes, 79 hits on top of that. So I think it's a good situation. Obviously not for him because he's leaving a Stanley Cup contending team, but fantasy value-wise, I think there's some top-notch there.
And maybe it translates into success for himself as well. Buried, I'd say, in Dallas Steel. So many good forwards in that top 9 group. Let's talk about it a little bit more. I'll hit you with my take on this Mason Marchman trade. Couple of signings, Duchene, Zetterland, Donato. We'll talk about it, and we'll get back to our NHL-wide breakdown of every single squad's top 5 fantasy targets later in the week. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. It's the NBA Finals, Game 7, OKC, back at home Sunday night. And where you'll be making those bets, it's on FanDuel Sportsbook. That's where you want to be tapping in game-winning shots, breakout players. The best time to get on the action is right now. We're loving the same-game parlays. Fans get more ways to win than ever before. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com today to place your first $5 bet. If it hits, $200 in bonus bets in your pocket. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We're going to get to Matt Duchene very shortly, signing a 4-year, $18 million deal.
Yeah.
Real quick, though, Mason Marchman, I know this is a player that you like a lot. I like a lot as well. What do you think about his value going into Seattle?
I look at his ice time steal, and this is what I wanted to wrap this up with because, you and I are doing a lot of hypotheticals, a lot of projections. We'll get a little bit more finite the closer we get to training camps. I'm already hyped for mock draft Mondays. We'll be doing Monday mock drafts all September long and even into October. So make sure you guys keep it tapped. 15 minutes of ice time he had last year, just over. I see that number creeping up to 18, 19 minutes with the Seattle Kraken. He's going to get a really good opportunity to be a leader in that top 6 forward group, like you alluded to. Does that automatically mean that there's success in terms of his offensive production? No. But that's the angle that you sometimes, as a GM, especially if you're able to get the piece of a player like this in the right round or even on a week 1 stream, I think he's a draftable player steal. With these minutes that we're expecting to be upticked, like you said, maybe he's your last forward. Maybe he's like, you've already stacked up your forward group and you're just going to take a little flyer. Mason Marchman, with an increased load of minutes, I think there's some sneaky good value here. I don't want to throw out sleeper because I feel like sleeper means he's going to increase. I still see around 50 points, maybe 60 points, 65 on a good year. I think that's one of those scenarios that let's just keep it in the cap. We'll revisit this come October and November.
Draft season, can't wait for. Also can't wait to see this guy play for another 4 years in Dallas. Matt Duchene signs re-ups with the Stars, 4 years, $18 million, $4.5 million AAV. Look, a guy who just had his second best season of his National Hockey League career, 82 points in 82 games, 152 shots, blocks and hits, it's whatever. But what he brought offensively and what he also did in the postseason for the most part, I know he only had 6 points in 18 games, struggled with that goal scoring, which he didn't struggle with in the regular season. But he's 34 years old. You get him till he's 38 on a really decent contract as well. With the way that he just played. I mean, I looked at his ADP. He was getting drafted on average 174th. He was going in the 16th round. So this guy's value jumped tremendously. What do you think he's going to be able to do once again in Dallas?
This is an intriguing situation that it's funny that we always preach to people, don't let what happened in the postseason overly impact what you do come draft season. And things went sour for those Dallas Stars. But I don't think that should really take away from the elite level fantasy production that we still expect from these players that are going to be back in Dallas. And I think Duchene, look, 86 points a couple of years ago in Nashville. He's kind of fluctuated. And then this past year, a really good, did I say 86 points? I don't know if I'm looking at that right. Anyway, he's been a little bit up and down in his career. And I think he's found an excellent fit in this system in Dallas. And we've thrown this out a whole bunch in the offseason. I want to wait and see what Jim Nill does with this forward group because, Steele, like you alluded to, rumors about Jason Robertson are a little bit upsetting because if that player is on the table and those kinds of moves and a shakeup of that magnitude is coming in Dallas and you had the season end in the nature it did. So by the way, 86 points for Matt Duchene in 2022. Back to 82 this year. I see him falling somewhere in between about, I'm going to say 65 to 70 points is what I expect. Still a ton of value. And depending on what happens in this offseason, let's revisit it because I really do think these Dallas Stars, along with the Rangers and a couple other teams we spoke about, their roster might look a whole lot different.
Yeah, it really might come July 1st. And honestly, not my first thought, but one of my first thoughts on this deal for Matt Duchene was, what is the contract going to look like for John Tavares as well? Because they had very eerily similar seasons. Both players are 34 years old. Like we just said, Duchene, 82 points in 82 games. John Tavares, 74 points in 75 games. Matt Duchene signs for 4 years, $4.5 million. I think that's what most Maple Leaf fans would like to see John Tavares do as well.
Whoa.
Probably more likely in the range of $5.5 million, but that's still pretty decent if you ask me. Matt Duchene, he's back in Dallas. I agree with you. I think this is still a guy that brings a ton of value, but will fall down from 82 points going to this next year, especially depending on what happens in the offseason for the Stars. Real quickly, do you want to get to Donato first or Zetterland with the Ottawa Senators?
Maybe let's just touch on Zetterland quickly. I don't know what your take is with this deal, because I think maybe I'm buying in too much to, I expect the Ottawa Senators, they took a step this year. We've been waiting on it. I think this is going to be a really good offensive club. And I guess I want a piece of Fabian Zetterland. I just don't think he's a draftable player still. And, he's got the upside. You hit me with your take, because clearly I've already spent too much time in the sun over the past couple episodes, and you seem to be reining me in. It's interesting, right? He's got the flair. He's got that offensive output. I don't know. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I like the signing. I do. And I think there's a lot of offensive potential here for a player that on the San Jose Sharks had 36 points in 64 games. Really struggled, though, after coming to Ottawa. So maybe he just needs a full season under his belt in a new system. Lots to like, though, with that Ottawa forward group.
Yeah, I think he just got the brunt end of the stick. I think he got a little bit shafted when he got traded to Ottawa. Not to say that it was a bad trade, because I think it was a really good one. But, he went from playing 16 and a half, 17 minutes with the San Jose Sharks to playing under 14 and a half minutes. He was playing in the bottom six group as well. He was playing in the bottom six throughout the entire postseason of the first round against the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think this player falls into the description of high risk, high reward. He's going to be starting the season most likely in the top six group. Again, most likely on the top line.
Especially if Giroux gets out of there.
Yeah, and top line with Tim Stützle and Brady Tkachuk. I think it's a flyer pick. I think this is a high risk, high reward situation. This is a player that had really good years in San Jose, 44 points in 82 games, had 41 points in 84 games this past year. He actually played two more than the regular season maximum, 84 games. That's funny too. But he had 40. He had back-to-back 40-point season. So he's still a young player. He's 25, soon to be 26 years old. He's getting a chance in Ottawa with a really young group, a really talented group as well. And we talk about this Ottawa team being a gold mine for players. Jake Sanderson, Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Drake Batherson, Claude Giroux, if he re-signs there as well. Let's throw in Linus Allmark in the plate. Sometimes Thomas Chabot. Sometimes this team is a gold mine fantasy hockey-wise. I think Zetterland is going to be a high-risk reward player, but it's maybe worth taking a shot on.
I'm just so excited to see how this July 1 window shakes out. I really don't mean to beat a dead horse here. With the cap going up, with how close I would say, Florida Panthers, clearly the best team. Edmonton Oilers, sure, right there. After that, you can't help but feel there's a lot of teams that realistically think they have a great shot next year, Steele. And that could make for absolute bedlam this offseason with a number of teams looking to improve. Chicago Blackhawks, not in that group, but they had a really good year from Ryan Donato. Fantasy value. Let's talk about it and wrap this bad boy up with a bow.
Ryan Donato re-ups with Chicago for another 4 years. We're going to get to his fantasy hockey value after the break. And like we always say, stay locked in to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Ryan Donato coming up after the break. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review for your boys here, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden. Over to you, my friend, Ryan Donato. We talked about the top 5 targets. I believe in that episode, he wasn't on my list because he wasn't re-signed with the team. He wasn't under contract.
And now he's back.
He makes it into that second position, right behind Connor Bedard. But what do you think about his fantasy value? Unbelievable season, 31 goals, 31 assists, career year.
Yeah, it's always hard to peg a player who had clearly their best season ever to repeat. I think the safe thing to do, especially on a team like the Blackhawks, is just to say, it's going to be 40 points, 60 was a stretch. I don't think so, actually. I think that this player, along with Connor Bedard, who clearly, there was a lot of pieces that sifted in and out with Connor Bedard in Chicago Steel. And this is, I think, one of the best pieces of business I've seen from the Blackhawks front office in a little while. Teravainen swing and miss. This Seth Jones thing has really kind of, I don't know how Blackhawks fans feel about that. You know what I'm getting at. So this feels like a win for this team. They've got some really intriguing young players. We talked about Nazar. We've talked about some of those guys on the back end, and you just spoke about high risk, high reward. I don't think this is as much high risk. I like Ryan Donato Steel. I think we just spoke about players like Mason Marchman that fill your very last slot. I'm going to say Donato slides in a little bit later, even perhaps like your literal last selection of the draft. Perhaps fantasy value tied to Connor Bedard. Ryan Donato, still a valuable player. Breakout year, 17% shooting percentage. I don't think he'll repeat that, but I could see 50, 55 points, no problem. Connor Bedard has a breakout year. That number goes up.
Yeah, I believe you have to look at the situation that Ryan Donato is in and what this Chicago team is in as well. Ryan Donato, he gets to play with Connor Bedard. As of right now, he's their second best player. Ryan Donato is. And Connor Bedard is a playmaker. Ryan Donato is a goal scorer. I'm not saying he's a natural goal scorer, but based off what we just saw this last year, 31 goals, he's the goal scorer for this team. I truly believe, because as of right now, Frank Nazar is listed as the number 1 center. I believe they're going to move Connor Bedard to the right wing at some point in his career, and I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. I think they're going to bring in a top first-line centerman to play in between Connor Bedard and Ryan Donato on going into this offseason. I think that's going to be one of their pursuits come July 1st, is targeting a number 1 true centerman. So, again, it would have been maybe intriguing to see Jonathan Toews go back there and he becomes their number 1 guy with Bedard, but he went with Winnipeg. I think that's going to be along the lines, but Ryan Donato brings a ton of value because he's going to be getting so much time and opportunity playing on that top line. He went from 13 and a half minutes to over 16 minutes in just the span of a year, and look what it did for his game. He gets to play with Bedard. It's a huge upside as well. So I like the value. I think this is a player that you definitely will want on your team, just somewhere in the mid to late rounds.
There's also this name that keeps popping up when I read about, good young players that no one's really talked about. Steel, Oliver Moore, 19th overall draft pick in the previous draft. In 9 games played this year, he popped 4 assists. Centerman with a whole ton of upside. There are players here upcoming in Chicago that I can't get overly excited about in the offseason with Chicago, but keep your eyes peeled here, because I have a feeling there are going to be a lot of fantasy GMs overlooking this young Chicago team. They're still going to be bad. They're still going to allow a lot of goals. But I think there's a come up in terms of the offensive production this season for Chicago, and I think you can get a piece of Ryan Donato and others for that. Just be careful. Kid gloves, literally, with this young team.
You can say the same thing for San Jose, Anaheim Ducks, a lot of young talent across the board in that Western Conference.
Love it.
From the bottom. We absolutely love it here on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Thank you so much for making the podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen, please check out the Locked On NHL podcast. They continue to do incredible and wonderful things over there. Hit the subscribe button for them as well. Thank you so much. There's no more bets for NHL, but if you're watching the NBA Finals, I don't know who you got, Flip. OKC or Pacers?
We live close to Hamilton down here, a little farther enough away that it's safe. Shout out to Hamilton, Ontario. Shout out to SGA. It's got to be the OKC
baby.
Thunder, baby. It's got to be.
Got to show some love to those Canadians out there playing in the finals and who played in the postseason. Once again, thank you so much for tuning into the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, making it your first listen every single day.
Peace.